Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Uncover the Human. We are here joined today with our guest, Jesus Salazar, who is a staple of the Denver community. He started a social impact company called Prosono, and he's here to talk with us a little bit about the journey getting into that. Welcome to the podcast, Jesus.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks.
Welcome.
Great to be here.
So, Jesus, you started Prosono, what is it, 3-4 years ago now?
Yeah, we'll have our 5th year anniversary here in June.
5 years. Wow,
Nice.
congratulations. That's a big milestone.
It is.
You want to talk to us a little bit about the journey getting into Prosono and what made you start it?
Yeah, sure. I think that at the highest level, about 5 years ago, I started seeing some really interesting macro trends around social impact. This was before it really hit the mainstream. But started seeing a surge in impact investing, which is sort of this concept of, was traditionally in the investment markets, but investing in companies that are either environmentally or socially responsible, and focus more on sustainability. And then looking at some larger consumer trends, right? You started seeing this thing called CEO activism and consumer activism being people voting with their dollars in their purchasing decisions. I had done a lot of nonprofit volunteer work leading up to that. Previously worked in technology and IT, a lot of custom software development, and kind of working in the corporate world all my life, but being heavily involved in the nonprofit world, just really realizing that there's this giant chasm between the two. For-profits really struggle to I think make the difference that they want to. And oftentimes they're forced to contribute negligible amounts of money relative to, if you look at their overall, expense, and outsource their impact to nonprofits, right? Which employees don't really like. They would rather make the difference themselves if they could and their work's meaningful. And then on the other side, on the nonprofit side, seen a lot of nonprofits kind of struggling with, one, being forced to give very prescriptive, rigid plans and how they're going to make a difference, when really, if we knew how to make a difference, we've made a difference already, right? That's kind of driven by how money and grants are given out. And then just kind of some of the struggles they were facing on how to activate volunteerism and skilled volunteerism. It's easy to get 100 employees from company X to go plant trees for a day, or read to children in classrooms, which is all good. But why aren't these nonprofits using data scientists and the engineers in these companies and like skilled resources to really so it's a really interesting problem. And those big macro trends kind of convinced me, right? They say when you're going to start a company, you need to make sure you're riding a wave. And although the wave wasn't there yet, decided it'd be interesting to take what I did, all of my career, that basically the 20 years previous, around rapid prototyping, iterative product development, kind of spending a lot less time really thinking and more learning by doing and experimenting and testing until you find something that works and something that people will use. And really kind of taking that ethos into the world of social impact, and then kind of all the same time trying to pull the world of for-profit and nonprofit together to work, in innovative ways. So that was the idea 5 years ago. And the way we started, I said, I'm going to hire a bunch of folks like me that, have done really crazy death march, projects for companies on the tech side, and understand that what it takes to hit these crazy deadlines and things like that. And then I'm going to go hire a bunch of nonprofit and social impact leaders. So people who have actually made really incredible differences in the world, but have also had to have an entrepreneurial mindset and own their own P&L. And I'm going to put them in a pressure cooker, because it really was, when we started a company, it was like oil and water. We kind of had the for-profit side wondering, how we're going to drive a sustainable business. And then the nonprofit folks wondering why we're making all these decisions, which look very greedy versus making a difference. And I'm like, well, we have to do both if we're going to survive. So we've got to figure it out. Right. Fast forward to now, we won Startup of the Year in 2019 with the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. We were a Best for Denver nominee, or Best for Colorado nominee. For Governor Polis handed out that award to us through the Alliance Center. And we were last year named one of Colorado's top 50 most civic-minded companies, which was really fun. So it's been a fun ride.
That's awesome.
That is
actually
awesome.
both Christina and I come from the Death March backgrounds of the consulting industry. That's actually where I met Jesus originally. I was working with Jesus at the consulting company. But that's really interesting conglomeration of things in a very narrow Venn diagram between that nonprofit side and the for-profit side, where you get to like try and live both sides of the coin. That's a very interesting model.
Yeah, it kind of was. I think in a lot of ways, on the social impact side, as I said, it's particularly oftentimes foundations, when they dole out grants to nonprofits, they want to know, what model are you following? Why you're taking something that has to be proven before, and like there's not all that many, or I'd say not enough. That are willing to unshackle nonprofits and let them really take on this entrepreneurial mindset of like, let's just try it out and really just, iteratively chip away at it. Which, Alex, is, in our previous career, that's what we paid to do.
Try it out.
Yeah, keep trying.
Exactly.
If it doesn't work, try again.
Yeah, right. So it's been working really, really well. I think a couple of they're not unintended consequences, but we probably weren't smart enough to realize this would actually happen, and it did. But what happened is, nonprofits really just embraced that. Kind of, how do you actually do it? It sounds great, right? Everybody says, "Oh, we want to be an agile organization," but once you kind of start showing them what it looks like, they're like, this sucks. Yeah. How do you hold people accountable? And it's just like, there's all these about, but once you kind of see you're actually getting out in the field and testing and doing things, it really resonates. But the really cool thing was that approach makes so much more sense on the corporate side and the for-profit side. So it instilled a lot of confidence in trying more things and being more involved, which was really cool to see.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, the idea of just spending time, and we've all heard of nonprofits, but you rarely hear about a nonprofit that's, the size of a Google or something, or has that kind of impact. So to marry those two is an interesting idea.
There's this huge trend out there, around collective impact, where it's, you just get really robust partnerships to focus on a single cause, and everyone contributes, what they do. It's kind of like the mega version of multidisciplinary teams, right? Which is sort of the new trend within organizations, and so there's kind of this thing where like, let's get 7 to 10 very different organizations that bring all these different things to the table to go tackle really meaningful things. So all of that stuff is, that we've all been doing kind of in our consulting careers for years. It's funny. It used to be just sort of pigeonholed into software and tech, but it's kind of leaked out, across industries and other verticals. It's really exciting.
That is very exciting. It's fascinating to see the change that's happening. And I bet the last year or so has made that wave a little bit bigger than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I said earlier, I always say when you're going to start a company, make sure you're riding a wave and not going against it. We definitely felt like the first 3 years, this was before last year, we were going against it, or there at least was no waves or no wind. So we were just kind of floating in the water trying to, get some momentum. But, last year between the pandemic and Black Lives Matter, really just completely shifted how the world thinks about social impact, and really galvanized, people. You could argue there's still tons of disagreement in how it should be approached and maybe what we should focus on. And there's definitely a huge polarization, but what you can't argue is there's not passion, towards them, towards the issues. And so that definitely last year, I would say the wave came and picked us up. And the good news, I think, sort of looking at the glasses half full, I think the first 3.5 years of Prosono, it kind of felt like we were doing some really heavy resistance training, just constantly like working so hard to try and figure out like, okay, this isn't a really defined market, social impact. When we started, there's no such thing as a chief impact officer and things like that. It's just barely a new thing. And we're struggling. And then last year, it's like all the weights came off the machine and, we feel like we got shot out of a cannon. So fun year.
It's interesting, the Black Lives Matter idea too, because that was one of the first times, I mean, everybody wanted to there was a lot of companies jumping on board and having, various social media posts. And there's a lot of disagreement, of course, about like whether those are particularly impactful, but it was the first time that I had seen that bulk of companies jump on board a social trend, which is an interesting point to what you're trying to do. I mean, that's something you have big brands like Nike or like, every brand had their own version of it, actually trying to say something outward about this. And then now I think there's even more accountability to be like, okay, well, you said those things. What are we doing about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think consumers are expecting companies to draw a line in the sand, right? And say, this is what we stand for, because they know that consumers vote, right, with their dollars and off of their value. And so what a lot of companies are doing is, they look at all these issues and they look at their board and their leadership and their employees and their current customers and their target customers, and they're trying to find, what resonates and what's out there. And you get punished, you get penalized for not taking that stand. And it's with the Black Lives Matter movement. Certainly, there's a lot of posts out there, right? And there shortly after that followed a ton of pressure on, talk is cheap. We've heard that before. What are you doing? But there's really there's a lot of really interesting data. I mean, record number of thoughtful DEI initiatives launched by companies. I think I heard a stat, it was like 40% of Fortune 500s launched DEI initiatives last year, and those are ones that didn't have, there were a lot of Fortune 500s that already had things in place and were doing it. Certainly just as you kind of like look at what companies are doing, it's certainly not lip service. It's hard and it's not perfect, but you see companies, they're no longer trying to be perfect externally. They're more focused on being authentic and transparent and showing you that they are trying. And similar to this point about social impact being product driven and iterative and continuous improvement and trying to, iterate your way to success, companies are taking a lot of pride in just showing that and sharing that externally with their customers and employees. And so it's an exciting time.
It is.
I love what you said about it being consumers voting with their dollars. You have a choice to do this. You want to support the companies that are doing initiatives that you care about, you feel connected to. You have a choice based on where you shop, and you can create, community organized boycotts, whatever it is, if you don't like what that's going, or you can try and support the companies that do. And I always think that's entertaining because there tends to be the pushback tends to be like, well, let's get the politics out of this. Let's let the free market decide. And this is, in my opinion, the free market deciding. The free market is people standing up and saying, no, I get to choose this. I'm going to buy X sneakers instead of Y sneakers. That is the trend. It's the power.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. This is sort of a nerdy nuance and bone to pick in the social impact sector, but you're hearing so much, people saying capitalism bad. There's this new thing. It's stakeholder capitalism or conscious capitalism, and it's kind of pitting, capitalism bad. There's this new thing that needs to be better. But at the end of the day, you have some of the world's foremost authorities on capitalism, folks like Jamie Dimon and others that are really pushing this agenda for corporate citizenship. And they wouldn't do this if they didn't believe it was ultimately going to result in shareholder value, right?
Yeah.
Point. At value, shareholder value and what is valuable, is kind of in the eye of the consumer, right? Yeah. And so the value system of tomorrow's investor, because of this rise in impact investing, right, is they're changing what they value. And so it's actually still capitalism. It's still shareholder value. The shareholder mindset is shifting, and a lot of that goes to, in those macro trends, I was talking about or referred to earlier, is this great wealth transfer. There's about $30 trillion of wealth that is going to transfer from baby boomers, down to their descendants in subsequent generations. And every generation, past the baby boomers is more, I don't want to say socially minded, but if you look at what they base their decisions off of, they care a lot more about this type of stuff. And so you see Larry Fink from BlackRock saying, okay, CEOs, we're only investing in companies that think this way and do that. And I'm like, he's not gone soft. He sees a $30 trillion football in the air. Yeah. He wants to position BlackRock perfectly for that. And so it's sort of a soapbox long rant, but just saying it's still capitalism, and capitalism we know, it's just the equation of what value is shifted.
Yeah. And it's just an equation people don't necessarily always want to, some people don't want to get behind, but it is an interesting way of looking at it because the two are not opposing forces in this. The two exist. It's just, you have to change the cultural mindset, and the cultural mindset tends to be about, and the corporate mindset, it tends to be a couple of years behind the cultural mindset. So you get that lag time where there's a lot more pent up energy for it. And then you hit something like this year, like you were talking about, the wave suddenly came. Suddenly there's enough energy for it. So I'm curious what kind of lessons you've learned over the last years. What kind of things have you guys gotten to do? I mean, just any stories around what this year has meant for you, what the wave catching beginning feels like.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest parts of starting a new business, right, is figuring out why people aren't ripping your products or services out of your hands. That's kind of what you want, right? You're like, what is the problem? And for us, I think one of the most valuable things we learned, and we kind of saw this pretty early, but how to solve it was a little bit of a challenge, is, when, and this kind of gets to why companies would, as I said, give relatively negligible amounts of money away and towards social impact. It's usually a smaller budget. It goes into corporate social responsibility. And I hate to say it, but it's often treated like a questionable marketing budget, right? If it doesn't make a significant difference, not going to really hurt them, and hurt. I'm sure there's accountability in the jobs and everything, but in a perfect world for us, we would love to find opportunities and social impact initiatives that make business sense, and I think in order to do that, they almost have to be packaged similar to capital investments, right? So when you have a board and a set of executives trying to figure out where they're going to place their big bets for the next year, it could be, do I go into this new market? Do we acquire this company? Do we launch a new office, or do we try and do this really innovative social impact, project? The problem is, on that social impact side, it's hard to measure what you get out of it, right?
Mhm.
Again, it's a questionable marketing budget. So you can't really compare apples to apples. So it never really makes the cut. And so kind of our vision is these big ideas are getting surfaced and packaged at that level. And to do that, you have to be able to measure
Mhm.
the difference you're making and have a concrete way to know what in social impact is working, what's not, how do we get better, how do we iterate on it, right? These are things that are in relatively easy to do in software because you have this thing called defects and bugs, and right, you're right, and you have all the metrics tied, well-defined metrics to do it. However, when you're, trying to solve for gender equality in developing countries, how do you do that? And so for us, it was so hard. It resulted in us buying a company last year, which is Vantage Evaluation, that specifically does this. They evaluate social impact initiatives and nonprofit programs, and help them understand, is it working? Is it not working? What are you learning? What is the next best thing to try? And how do you get better and chip away at it? So for us, if we can integrate that into, when we do strategy and how we do this actual building of these programs, and we have that wired in, we believe that's could be just foundational in changing how companies just have more confidence in investing in these big ideas. This is a really long answer. You caught me on a really nerdy question, so I'll do the second one shorter.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. The least we talk, the better this goes.
I think the second one, for us, is so many organizations, they're kind of forced into this, but they have to focus on the direct provider to consumer relationship in social impact. So for instance, if you're working on hunger issues, if you're a for-profit, your best thing is to invest in nonprofits that feed families directly. And unfortunately, it's because that's where all the photo ops and the marketing opportunities are, right? And that's where all the feel stories are. And because if that's where the money's gravitating to, oftentimes, nonprofits end up working in that space. But these social issues are so complex. There's these massive ecosystems surrounding them, right? You have influencers, you have subject matter experts, you have evaluators, you have kind of service providers in the middle that are stitching it all together. There's all of these roles. And most of the big bottlenecks are upstream, right? And so there's just not that much attention applied where it's needed. And so for us, one of the things that we do is we can look at a social issue, say it is financial empowerment or financial literacy. We can map out that entire ecosystem to really show where those bottlenecks are, and sure, they're not going into classrooms and teaching kids, not how to use Bitcoin. That's probably not a very financial but it's fixing those crux bottlenecks upstream that will unlock value and unlock impact down the road. And they're way more impactful. They're maybe not as sexy, and so, but to the previous point, if you can't understand why that bottleneck's important, and then you don't have the tools to measure if that's going to make a difference and how you're going to tell that that's actually resulting in net, pretty catalytic impact, why are you going to invest significantly in that? And so those are probably the two of the biggest learnings, that we've really excited about trying to stitch a solution together for.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So one of the things that I keep wondering about is, especially since, when you started, as you said, start a business when you can ride a wave, and the wave wasn't quite there yet. And clearly, or maybe you did, you couldn't predict 2020 what happened. What makes you keep going? Because besides, clearly it's passion. That there's there, of wanting to make a difference, of wanting to actually find solutions to help the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, you talk to anyone here at Prosono, they're just super driven. They want to make a difference. And so part of it is, and they've all worked on social impact in one form or another and have felt a ton of frustration in why aren't we able to solve things. And so what we've done here at Prosono is we've kind of been very honest, and we don't know either, but we're going to treat this as a research project in a lot of ways. This is where you're going to have license, and we're going to collectively and humbly just try things, and we're going to iterate as fast as we can. What we found out is this is very different from, putting phantom features on an e-commerce website and seeing if people will click the button and buy. You're like, something like, great, well, we'll see 3 years from now if that, because it's just a slower process. And so for us, the endeavor of just trying to tighten those feedback loops, is a worthwhile, endeavor as it is. But to us, there's just so much opportunity there. It just feels so untapped. Where you could say we're in search of that big lever. And so I think just the idea of stumbling onto that at some point is really exciting for us.
That makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah. It's refreshing, actually, because while I have worked in consulting, I think I was in the resistance training room with the people side of things, which is also very hard to measure when you do people and change management consulting, whether it's working or not. You're constantly working against the resistance of wanting to do it and accepting it, adopting, besides the resistance of people adopting change and buying into it. You also have the lack of the financial and investment support most of the times. And so it's, but, the way I see it is, and a lot of what Alex and I are doing as well is this, we believe that humanizing the workplace is absolutely necessary. It's not a negotiable. And so we'll just keep going with the research project of getting there, because when we get the ROI questions of how do I know this, whatever planned training program approach is going to work, show me the numbers. And I'm like, well, talk to me in 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I can show you the numbers. I can't show you when we're done.
Yeah. I really like the word that you all are using, which is humanizing, which insinuates you can't just say we're going to humanize your company. Like there's this end human state that, it's going to be awesome. Trust me. But, it's more just, it's the process, it's more about the journey than the destination.
It is.
A lot of things, right? Which is so important. I mean, I do think the world definitely is changing. I think it used to be, that was an old, I think old school thinking, which is, where are the numbers? Where's the destination? How long is this going to take? And what do I get for it? And you're kind of seeing, a lot of these things. It's like, it's more about going on the journey, even corporate DEI initiatives, it's like, to say we're going to do these 5 steps and then be perfect and it'll all be over. It's like, no, this is a journey we're going to go down. That's all there is the journey.
It's one of those things where if it goes right, people aren't necessarily saying it. It's not like you get that 5-star Amazon review. It's not like you can point to like, look at our hockey stick chart where the sales went off the charts this year. It's just great. When it works well, everybody just feels better. Like things just are better, and you don't, like, you're just working on whatever the next problem is there. And they can be glad that it worked, but there's, it's not necessarily the feedback loop of like total success. And that's one of the things that I think people maybe get like a bit of a dopamine rush off of, but it doesn't happen for something that is, like you're saying, a process. It's something that you learn, something that you're experimenting with, and it's something that just takes a journey to go through.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the really powerful ways of looking at this, this type of work, whether it be social impact or humanizing, a company it's like these concentric circles, right? And so at the end of the day, we're going to set you on a path of continuous improvement, and just kind of build it to where it's sort of an automatic habit. Yeah. That's what you're getting, right? is this permanent curiosity on how we drive it forward together. And I think that's when you've arrived. For us, we are big on it. We're not just like, let us do all the impact and hand it back to you and then you get the credit for it. It is very much, like no one wants to do that. We'll help co-build, we'll kind of get the process in place and kind of show you how you keep doing this. And, for us, some of the most rewarding times are when clients end up running with it on their own and you just sort of see, the light bulbs going off and you feel like you took your hand off the wheel and like, God, this company is going to continue to drive more impact forever. That's what we want. It's time to move on to the next one. And, that's how for us, that's how we are going to, achieve our mission, which is accelerating the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, right? We're not going to be able to be in every company forever. We're going to do one short project and squeeze all the impact value out of them and move on to the next one. They kind of set them on the path.
Yes.
Well, it fits really well with your guys' strengths. If you guys are coming from a lot of like consulting and for-profit backgrounds and they're just really excited about doing the death march type of work, like it fits really well just to do those short sprints with companies. It's not that you want to necessarily live the long haul with every single company, but you want to set them on the right foot and then get to do the same thing in the next context and learn the next thing. Like it's a great fitting of the strengths of the team you're building.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You used like 3 words in your last answer that really just tickled my brain. I love the habit and permanent curiosity. I think those are really key phrases when it comes to what anytime you learn more about like what works in social impact, what works in trying to change things that are long-term, systemic and difficult. Those are the things that come up time and time again. There's the permanent curiosity of what you feel internally. There's just being, I want to get better at this. I want to learn more about this. And then there's the habit, just trying to learn the habits of how do I keep this going forward? Not just some, weekend retreat where you do, what was like all of the last 15 years, which was like, we're going to do diversity training. It will be one weekend and then we're done. We'll all be diverse all year diverse, until the next year.
Yeah,
everybody feels included. We're all set.
Yeah, totally right. It ties to these sort of just broader trends, right? This fourth industrial revolution, and thing is, for us is more or less going to be put on autopilot, right? And so, like for us, I think it's important that these types of things, to me, when something's a habit, it's on autopilot, so you can focus on the next challenge, right? And so simple things like just having permanent curiosity on how you're going to tackle poverty or hunger. I think just that pursuit is going to be so important, and once you kind of have that muscle memory, that frees you up then to use all of your brain power for innovative, new, more creative to try, right? And as I said, if you take, this new future where, with AI, machine learning, the working of software and advanced manufacturing, so much, we're going to be able to like run crazy advanced experiments with all of that technology. The big bottleneck will be what we can creatively come up with, to solve a problem, right? That's sort of like we're going to another meta level above that. So.
The next wave.
I love that metaphor of the machine learning too. It's kind of, we've developed to a certain point. We had the boom of technology in the 90s. We had some growing technology, lots of SaaS innovations in the last 20 years. We're reaching, I wouldn't say a plateau. There's still plenty of innovation happening, but there's not necessarily as much there. So that's starting to feel a little bit more habitual. Now, if we can get social impact to be like a big wave, and then that becomes more habitual, then you can go find the next efficiency, go find the next avenue to explore. Now you've got companies that have the social impact or working on sustainability, and then catch whatever our next wave that is going to be coming in. Hopefully not a pandemic wave.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. As you kind of said that, Alex, one thing that struck me, I'm like, maybe just, the habit, making social impact a habit is an old person's game. Because I think you talk any kid coming out of college right now, it is what they care about.
Yes.
The problems they're trying to solve. they already have it on automatic. I think they're
Mhm.
just waiting for old farts like me to catch up, maybe, or just get out.
Well, it sounds like you've already caught up. So
Trying to keep up, I guess.
don't give up. Just keep
I'll
going.
tell you, it's been really fun. We're doing a lot of college recruiting right now, and you just see, students coming out of college, and they have org design and psychology majors and like a social impact minor where they're learning about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and human-centered design and all of these things. And they're like, I'm going to use this to solve a world problem, and I want to go work for a place that does that. I also went to school at Vanderbilt, so I need to, pay for that. So I need a, I need a high job that does that. You know any? So it's kind of like it's just really interesting. Like I said, I think they're either going to invent the companies that figure out that model, that can sustain, or they're going to turn existing companies, from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
It is fascinating if you look at companies today, right? They have this impact investing pressure, and
Mm-hmm.
like Jamie Dimon, Larry Fink saying, we are changing who and how we invest. So you either are investable or not.
Yeah.
Have employees saying, I want a job that I can directly connect to improving a community around me. I need to be able to connect those dots, or I'm going to find someplace else to work. And then you have the customers that are saying, okay, I have 2 shampoos that perform reasonably equally. Which company do I like better and match my value system? And so you think about the pressure companies have. I mean, it's coming from all sides, right?
Well, and that's how change is going to happen, though. Change doesn't happen if you're not disturbed.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I don't mean to ask about your secret sauce or anything with Prosono, but what are things that you've like? What are metrics you like to measure against? What are things you're looking for in the future? What's the next year looking for, like?
Yeah, a lot of it is I don't want to say nerdy stuff, but a lot of it's just pretty basic financial stuff, trying to predict how our pipeline shifts to, and how that translates to revenue at the end of the day. And we because of my background, I mean, we measure everything. We measure every meeting and how we can make it. We do like net promoter score for every meeting, and how do you it's a little maddening sometimes, but it works. It's kind of everywhere. But on the impact side for us, one of the things that's a really exciting challenge, is we have this goal, that sort of that big lever. How will we know if we found that big lever, on social impact? We have a goal that for every $1 of revenue we bring in, we can point to 5 times that in social return on investment. Right. So that means like the economic value of the good that our work did, or the solution we put in place is, again, humbly, we don't know how to do that. When you work across all of the SDGs, you're dealing with environmental issues, social, there's just so much diversity in the causes. So how do you get a common denominator and get that down to a $1, right? And so for us, this is also one of the reasons we're really excited at the opportunity to buy Vantage last year. Is I think there are secret puzzle piece to unlocking that, right? We have a pretty good theory on how you do that. You can get to, at the end of the day, you can get to some pretty strong output metrics on how many families you fed, or how many folks experiencing homelessness, you're able to get them in a housing situation. But then, finding an anchor economic study that sort of talks about, what is the ultimate net economic benefit to society, sort of using that, and then extrapolating the impact and those numbers you'll get, and discount it down to net present value, and you can kind of get to, okay, this is what the social return on investment is of this project, and so for us, the way we kind of look at it we have in our charter, we have to hit both, right? We have to hit these revenue targets and these social return, on investment targets by a certain date. And so what that forces us to do is, we'll look at a project, and this is kind of where we want to get. We want to be able to look at a project and say, well, very, very high social return on investment. We can take a pretty big hit from a revenue standpoint on this one. We get another one, we're like, it's not quite the lever we're looking for. Therefore, our rates will correspond to this, and we'll use one to sort of balance out the other, and sort of play the shell game.
That's cool.
That's very cool.
A pretty unique one to kind of what we're doing. I think the other one, I don't know if this is super unique, but it's worked better than I had ever hoped. Right? There's very, very common to use net promoter score, right, for customer satisfaction. But in a small B2B business like us, I mean, it doesn't really, net promoter score is great when you can get hundreds of thousands or thousands of data points every week and get all that. But when you only do 120 projects in 5 years, it's a little harder to get that formative data. So and in consulting, for us, we basically were 100%, right? I mean, we were getting 9s and 10s the whole time. So for us, one of the really cool metrics or things we did was we made it a process, so we have baked into, when we do a project, we ask every 2 weeks with our main stakeholder, like, right, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you recommend us for this type of work? What would a 10 look like? And I look at that daily data weekly across our project. So I look at two things: that sort of average net promoter, it's not 100, it's an average. So we'll be like 9.4 out of 10, which I'm like, great, we're 9s and 10s, generally. But then I have another one, which is NPS aging, which is basically, I want to know which project has gone the longest without asking this question, because what you find is, there might be a client where, or we haven't asked that question for 6 weeks, which there's sometimes a reason why that hasn't been asked. Maybe there's something. And so then we can look at, okay, what's the client, what's the project? Okay, let's go have that conversation and go get it, And I said our average right now is about 9.4 out of 10 since the inception of our company. We've been able to, everyone says, we're a 9 or a 10 by the end of the project, because it's a formative every 2 weeks, even if we're working with you for 3 years, and worked really, really well for us.
That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, that's really cool. And this is somewhat embarrassing to admit, but I do not really know a lot of the UN SDGs, the United Nations Social Sustainability Development Goals. Do you have some of those top of mind that you guys are working on?
Yeah, so I don't have all 17 of them memorized, but it starts with no. So it's no poverty, zero hunger. I'll even pull them up just to make sure I don't screw up too much. Good health, well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable clean energy, and it goes on to reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, and so there's a ton of them. We have worked. I mean, we've worked across most of them, and often what happens is a project does tie into 3 or 4 of them. The great thing that the United Nations member countries did was they said these are 17 goals, but there's about 170 targets in there. I mean, there are deep metrics tied to them. Some of them are like country level economic, numbers. But for us, we try to tie every project we do to at least identify the SDG and potentially the metric that it could or could not impact, even if it's a drop in the bucket, right? If it's a very small nonprofit in Ohio or something, right? We still try to say, well, this is at least relevant to that. But you could probably say we worked across all of them at one point, because there was a really cool project where it's called a Solution Summit, where this is part of the folks that helped sort of drive the UNSDGs forward, found all these amazing entrepreneurs from all over the world that were directly solving a UNSDG challenge. So, these were groups that were building a blockchain database to help with real estate transactions in Ghana, or a company that had, this was really cool. They had some drones that they could arm with seed pods and fertilizer pods, and literally send an army of drones out to landscape the topography of a landscape. And right, I mean, they're like flagging the rocks and the cliffs and the water. And then you can send those drones back out armed with all these seed pods, and they're just shooting seed pods directly into the ground versus, right, you drive over with a helicopter and it just sprays them all over, and they're bouncing off of rocks and trees, and half of them don't grow. The efficiencies of the model are massive, right? And so what we did, this was in our early days, but we hit each SDG every day, and we did a marketing campaign for each of those entrepreneurs and try to connect them with corporate partners, because they're scrappy, they're underfunded, it's really cool ideas. And we took some to google.org to see if we could get Google to help with donate some skilled resources to them. And so it was a really fun one.
That's a great one.
That's awesome.
Wow. Yeah, I was looking at these actually on the website, and I see how most of them, if not all of them, are connected to each other. They're not siloed. And so I can see how that would come up in projects as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most issues will tie at least 3 or 4 of them together.
Yeah.
That's really super interesting. So you got a framework of things you want to solve. You're getting more and more metrics on how to solve them. You're helping lots of different businesses in different ways of doing this. Are you finding and going back and maybe going over postmortems to figure out different frameworks that are useful in multiple scenarios? Does it feel like there's ties between them, or does it feel like each project is more unique?
It is so vast, and even a large nonprofit, it's hard to say like they're really making a massive dent in zero hunger worldwide, right? So you kind of have to like pick your box, and so for us, and kind of to the spirit of being calling ourselves a research company, those projects are all valuable learning for us, right? We are learning one, how do you make sure you can, no matter what the challenge is, you can get to a positive outcome for everybody. I think a lot of the common things, are centered around, how do you measure universally? How do you that ecosystem concept was a big one, a big framework. We're like, gosh, this is the problem. Everyone's crowded around that provider consumer, and there's so many problems are being overlooked. That's something we really need to tackle on. And I think the other thing too, this is sort of a challenge for us, or has been a challenge for us, is I'm not even sure what the scale, for a company like us would need to be to, say we are truly accelerating the achievement of the SDGs in a meaningful way. So part of this journey is also just getting a feel for that, right? But ideally, we're gonna kind of hit that point where we have a pretty clear theory of action of how we're gonna do it, what we need to get there. And at that point, I think that's where we'll go all in and really look to scale, right? I mean, it's just, looking forward to getting to that point.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Sounds like a great journey.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's very, it can be heartbreaking at times working in impact space. I think there is a lot of romanticism tied to it. I think people, that haven't worked in it, they just, again, it's sort of that photo op side things, but I think the real change is, it's hard, and it's challenging, but it's really, when you do get some wins, it just feels so good. Definitely better than any win I had in IT.
But that's March. Yeah, I'm sure you get to the point where you just want to hit people in the head and be like, why don't you get it? It's not that hard. And
yeah, it's it is, I think, probably one of the, we see a lot of people that do jump into this space. You could argue we might have been like that at some point very early, where you're like, oh, I've done all these cool things in the corporate side. I'm just going to take that and apply it here. But then you realize, social impact, it impacts communities, and it's just so intertwined. I mean, you have to have a very different mindset with it. Otherwise, society will literally reject your solution.
Yeah.
It's like a body rejection. I mean, you have to do all of that groundwork. And a lot of people don't really realize how hard that is. It's really interesting. I think in a lot of ways, when you're building a product, say in the corporate world, you do get to kind of choose who your target market is and what your segment is. In social impact, you can't really change who your customer is. Right? I mean, customer is the customer, and you have to meet them where they're at. Right? Is sort of the common thing that people say. And so it's much harder than getting a product that people will use, outright. There's just so many more dimensions to it, which requires that much more of an intensity on, human-centered design and iteration and experimentation and, getting to outcomes. So
it's super interesting, everything you guys are doing. So if for any listeners out there who want to know either how to join a space like this or find you or find your company, where might they start?
Yeah, or you go to Prosono.com is probably the best way. We our general contact info is info@Prosono.com. Secret, it just goes to me and our president, so it's as good as
direct access. The way to do it.
Great inbox. So, those are probably the two best ways. You can find me on LinkedIn pretty easily. Pretty active on there. Always open to sharing cool projects and ideas, out there. And that's probably the best way.
That's awesome.
And we'll include this all in the show notes for sure.
Thank you so much for joining us for this, Jesus. Any other questions you got while we got them, Christina?
Well, our last questions, which is our typical one, is what does authenticity mean to you?
What does authenticity mean to me? I'll say it's when your actions and behaviors are in harmony with your purpose. Right.
I like that.
I think there's I think in work, you probably talk about, right, what they say when you hit your flow.
Yeah. I
think to me, authenticity is probably that natural state, right? Whether you know what your purpose is or not, but sometimes you just do things that feel right and natural, and there's sort of this consciousness to it. Yeah.
That's a great and one of the most succinct answers I think we've had. That's perfect. That wraps it.
I was going to keep going. I'm like, shut up, Jesus, shut up.
No. Well, clearly it seems like you're living a very authentic life in your career by what you're doing.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's funny. I get so many college students that are like, how did you do that? How do you start a company and you're doing nothing but social impact and you're doing stuff, like, how do you do that? And, it was kind of weird. I mean, I definitely it started getting a little hard to get out of bed every day and build large, complex tech solutions. I did it for about, 20 years. And there really wasn't, I definitely was at a position in my life where I could definitely try something new. And I didn't really see anything where I could have the freedom and flexibility to really try to do something really, really impactful. I did not want to rely on external funding, from foundations and things like that. I want to build something that has a sustainable revenue model underneath it so that it can scale infinitely technically, right? It can scale as good as the solution is. And so my impact will grow and we won't have to rely on outside funding, right? And there wasn't really anything out there I could find that truly did that well. So decided to start my own company to do it. And it's been a dream. I think my worst day, at Prosono has been better than my best day, throughout my professional career. And so it's been a really, really fun ride and look forward to seeing where it goes from here.
That's awesome. It's always fun to talk to people who get to live in their purpose. And that's what this feels like. This feels like you've got a good connection here. And speaking of that, do you want to give the listeners an Easter egg on where you came up with the name Prosono and what it means to you?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, sure. So Prosono means loosely, it's a Latin mishmash of words that means to let your purpose echo. So Proposium is self-identity being, which we said that's close enough to purpose. And then sono means to echo or to resonate.
That's beautiful.
That's great. Love it.
How long did it take you to come up with that name?
It's funny. Came up with lots of great names, but I think we joked about this before. The domains are what really gets you because there's something available. So, it didn't take long. I just, grabbed a bunch of Latin words. I started piecing them together till I found one that was reasonably easy to say. It looks good. And the domain was less than $20,000. So I was like, sold, let's do it.
Yeah. Not much better than others.
So Prosono is Prosono, and we have talked to Jesus Salazar. Thank you so much for joining, Jesus. This is truly a fascinating conversation. Thanks for sharing everything with us.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks, guys.